Welcome back to Stakelbeck Tonight. We are live here in Washington, D.C., breaking down all the latest on Operation Epic Fury. Israel, of course, is calling it Operation Roaring Lion, and no one knows the U.S. Israel relationship better than our good friends at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD, right here in Washington, D.C. We are joined now by the founder and president of FDD, Cliff May, and executive director of FDD, our good friend Jonathan Schanzer. Gentlemen, always great to see you. John, you and I were talking off camera. You've got an update on that Kurdish situation. We mentioned there were reports on Fox News of a Kurdish ground offensive, Iraqi Kurds essentially invading Iran, I guess, and mounting an offensive. Do we have any new details on that?
We do, and it actually looks like less of a story than was originally reported. This was Jen Griffin who had come out with the story initially. The Kurds were denying this, and then it turns out, as she got clarification from a senior U.S. official, that these were Iranian Kurds returning to their homeland, and their goal still is to try to topple the regime, but these are not outside Kurds, which could make, it could calm some of the nerves of some of the Iranians who were worried about outsiders coming in to settle their conflict. But there still will be tensions about the fate of the Kurds at the end of all of this. It's always been a sticky issue inside Iran. I expect it'll remain to be one.
John, thank you for that. That's a very important clarification, no doubt. And Cliff, we've been talking as we see, God willing, very soon, a future for the Iranian people free at last. We've been talking about this succession right now after Khamenei. There are rumblings that his son may be named supreme leader in his stead. Do we know anything more about that? Who's in charge right now, essentially, in Tehran? And will Khamenei's son take the mantle? Although I have a sneaking suspicion he may not last very long.
Well, Khamenei himself wanted his son to succeed him. That's an interesting thing and an odd thing, because if you think about it, the idea that there'd be a dynasty once again in Iran after the revolution, which, as I've said for years, was not an Iranian revolution, it was an Islamic revolution, but that's still quite something. It's not an election, it's a selection by, I would say, the very high members of the Iranian Islamist elite. It's very hard, as you say, for them to gather together to cast ballots or say aye or nay or whatever it is. The Israelis have been very clear. If this is who turns out to be the new supreme leader, as they like to say, the new dictator, then he will be number one on the target list. He is not somebody that President Trump will be able to say to, let's figure this out. Sort of what he has done in Venezuela, for example, where Delcy Rodriguez, who was number two to Nicolas Maduro, he made her understand, if we can get along, you'll survive. If we can't get along, well, there's probably a jail space for you in Brooklyn, quite close to Maduro's.
Well put, Cliff. And John, look, it seems that we've seen a pretty noticeable decline today in the missile and drone launches out of Iran. What are you hearing? Iran's missile stockpiles hopefully diminished rapidly over the past few days. Are you hearing anything more about the state of play when it comes to Iran's capabilities at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers right now, I think, are rather stark for the Iranian regime. It looks like they've lost, I think, somewhere around 80% of their stockpile, either by firing it or by having it destroyed on the ground. Now, what we know is that the United States has started to help the Israelis in the hunt for these missiles. As we're hearing right now, that the United States has actually bombed some of the underground facilities housing some of those missiles. And so where there was somewhere between, let's say, 3,000 to 5,000 missiles when this thing started, we're down to pretty low numbers, probably about where things stood at the end of the 12-day war last year before Iran began really trying to ramp back up. But Eric, the big thing that we all need to keep watching is it's actually the number of launchers that probably matters more. Now, we have mobile launchers and static launchers, but they all need to be destroyed, because if you can't get them up on a launcher, you can't get them up in the air. And there are far fewer of these. I understand that 300 have already been destroyed, and there's maybe 300, maybe 200 left. The more that the Israelis and the United States can take those out, the safer the skies will be in the entire region. Now, that does not obviate the concern over drones. There are a lot of drones in Iran's possession, and they're relatively cheap to make. They're able to produce them in mass. And so that becomes the next challenge. But those are a little bit easier to shoot down with short-range air defense systems. And I suspect it'll be easier specifically for the Arab countries that have been struggling with the missiles. I think they'll have an easier time intercepting those drones.
Yeah, John, speaking of which, and Cliff, I should say, speaking of which, those drones have targeted U.S. consulates in the region, and in particular, Iran's Arab and Muslim neighbors. Cliff, do you think there's still the possibility, perhaps the Saudis and others, get involved in this fight against Iran in a military sense?
I think there is that possibility. I think it should happen. I think President Trump should pressure them to do so, particularly the Emiratis and the Saudis. They have a lot of military equipment they bought from America. They should be involved in this. This was a real miscalculation, I suspect, on the part of Iran's surviving rulers. I think they thought if they could show that the war was spreading, that it was going to be out of control, then the various leaders and rulers in the Arab world would come to Trump and say, you have to stop this right now because it's hitting us. I don't think he sees it quite that way, and I don't even think they see it quite that way. I think they now recognize, in a way they hadn't before, that this regime is a danger to them as much as it is to Israel and to America.
Yeah. John, about a minute or so left. Okay, the Arab nations are getting that. Has Europe received the memo that Iran is an existential threat to the West? Keir Starmer, obviously. Spain, President Trump has been highly critical of both, and for good reason. What are you seeing right now out of Europe and their response to all of this? About a minute left.
Sure. I mean, I think it's fascinating. You know, the French, on the one hand, are trying to run interference for Hezbollah. They're trying to prevent the Israelis from attacking, and they are attacking right now. But they're also sending aircraft to the UAE to try to protect their skies. The Brits are in Cyprus trying to shoot down Hezbollah rockets and drones that have been fired, but also some of the Iranians. So we're seeing some of these European countries slowly come around to the understanding that this regime is a problem, that it needs to be countered. I still have hope that we'll be able to reach some kind of consensus here. Even if they're not all on board the Trump train, they may be able to get behind this operation, specifically as the Arab states really begin to band together behind this U.S. operation.
Yeah, John, great breakdown. You mentioned Hezbollah. After the break, I want to get into that. Their role in all of this, things heating up to Israel's north, of course. And what's the state of Iran's ring of fire, that terror axis right now? Folks, no one does it better than this all-star panel. It's FDD.org, the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Cliff May, John Schanzer. Follow them across social media. And after the break, our panel will be back. Again, Hezbollah. And what about that Trump-Netanyahu alliance? Is this a pair of Churchills? Is this a modern-day Reagan-Thatcher tandem? More with our panel after the break. Stick around. Welcome back to Stakelbeck Tonight. We are coming to you live from Washington, D.C. with a special report, Conflict in the Middle East, and we are joined once again by our all-star panel, Cliff May and Jonathan Schanzer of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's FDD in D.C. Gentlemen, this relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, I think it's safe to say at this point, even after the events of June, the 12-day war, Midnight Hammer, this is an historic partnership. Cliff, we think of Reagan-Thatcher bringing down the Soviet empire. You think of Churchill. Is this tandem going to go down in history as really the duo that brought down Iran's terror empire? And that would really carve out, I think, a unique place in history for them.
I certainly hope so. I think, look, at the very least, what you want to see is that the Islamic Republic of Iran, after all these 47 years, taking hostages, killing Americans, assassination plots, supplying IEDs to Shia militias to kill Americans during the Iraq War. I could go on and on. This will finally at least be enfeebled. Hopefully will be out of power entirely. That, by the way, will give the chance, at least a chance, to the people of Lebanon, the people of Yemen, the people of Iraq to be free, as opposed to being vassal states under a blood-soaked Islamic empire. All that is possible. And there's one other thing. The Pentagon, and I think President Trump as well, John, correct me if I'm wrong, they've now called Israel the model ally. What does that mean? It's a model that can fight for itself and fight common enemies. The president wants to see Europeans also take the lead against common enemies. That would be Russia and certainly Japan, for example, and to help in the Pacific. We have what we call an FDD, an axis of aggressors: Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, Pyongyang. America can't and shouldn't have to do it alone. Our allies need to be partners, as Israel is, not dependents.
Yeah, Cliff, well said. Look, Israel, the first line of defense for Western civilization. The United States, under President Trump in particular, the last line of defense. John, Cliff mentioned Lebanon and shared enemies, and we got to talk about Hezbollah, if that's the case, launching rockets earlier today in tandem with Iran and throwing their hat in the ring a bit here, Hezbollah, but they're not what they were. Clearly, what's the state of things up north with Hezbollah?
Sure. Well, I mean, it started with a couple of rockets that Hezbollah fired, and this came after something like 500 violations of the ceasefire agreement. I mean, the Israelis have had to just keep chipping away at Hezbollah. They've tried to keep things kind of contained. But I think the sense in Israel is, this threat is not going away. Hezbollah still has something like 20% of its arsenal from before when the war began, which means they've got something like 30,000 rockets at their disposal, some of them long range, some of them quite lethal. And so I think the Israelis arrived at the conclusion very soon after that first round of rocket attacks that it was go time, that they were already mobilized, they were going after the Iranian regime, that this was house cleaning time. This is like that scene in The Godfather. All the enemies are going down if they trifle with the Israelis. And so what we've seen actually now is the head of the Hezbollah intelligence has been killed. There have been a number of significant strikes, including this evening, on what the Israelis are calling Hezbollah core infrastructure in Beirut. So they're attacking the headquarters of Hezbollah in the capital of Lebanon. The Lebanese are saying that they have had it with Hezbollah too, that they want to dismantle this group once and for all. And I think we're starting to see at least some signs of support from abroad as well. So I suspect this is going to open up into a full second front. And yes, Hezbollah is firing rockets on top of the missiles that are being launched out of Iran in an attempt to confuse Israeli missile defense. It doesn't look like it's working yet, but there's a lot of action in the skies over Israel.
Guys, it's amazing. Hamas carries out the massacre of October 7th. Little did they know it would lead to the downfall, essentially, of the entire Iranian terror empire less than 2.5 years later. Amazing. Cliff, there's been some opposition to this joint operation. The woke right, the Tucker Carlsons of the world we expect, and the left as well. But their arguments don't seem to hold water. That's an illegal war, et cetera. Can you break down a bit why this is perfectly justified, this operation ordered by President Trump?
Yes, it's really amazing that you have these people in the Tucker Carlson ilk who really are making the same arguments that Bernie Sanders is, that Rashida Tlaib is, that Code Pink is, all the same arguments. But let me take it the other direction and say that when America has an enemy, and again, we talked about this, this has been an enemy since 1979. I was there for the revolution. They began to chant death to America, and then the question arises, how do we achieve that? I'm not saying one nuclear weapon on an intercontinental ballistic missile hitting an American city would wipe out America, would be an existential threat, but America would never be the same. And even hitting Israel was meant to be an attack on America because there's the great Satan America and the little Satan Israel. Israel is seen as an extension of Judeo-Christian values in the Middle East. They want it wiped out. And they have been killing Americans, more than 600 during the Iraq War. They have tried to assassinate and kidnap Americans on this soil. You can go, I could go on all day about it. So what's the president doing? He's saying, we're not going to take this. He's saying we are going to confront our enemies, not make concessions, not send pallets of cash. We are going to confront them and we are going to defeat them. That's putting America first. And it's make America great again when the American military is as powerful as it is. And it can hit an enemy with such precision that there are Iranians in the streets dancing while the bombs are falling, because they know that President Trump is not trying to hit them. He would like, if he possibly can, to liberate them. What he's told them is, look, after this, it'll be up to you to try to have a decent country. We'll help. We can't do it for you, but we can help. Boy, if that's not America first, if that's not make America great again, I don't know what could be.
Yeah, Cliff, well said. And look, it's been essentially a half a century nearly of jihad by the Iranian regime against the United States. Trump said enough is enough. Finally, John, about a minute left. Speaking of President Trump, his vision for the region, the Abraham Accords, are they very much back on the table if and when, God willing, this regime in Tehran collapses? About a minute left.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I like the prospects of it a lot more right now than I did just even a couple of short weeks ago. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we were watching the Saudis and the Emiratis fight and point fingers at each other. Right now, they're fully aligned again, in defiance of this common threat from the Islamic Republic. That's a good sign. I want the Saudis to see themselves as being aligned with the UAE, which has a terrific, warm relationship with the Israelis. And as we've talked about, Eric, for a long time, the minute the Saudis enter into some kind of alliance with the United States, that's when the dominoes start to fall. Other countries around the Muslim world will do the same thing. I like right now that you've got a bunch of Arab countries, whether they know it or not, whether they want to admit it or not, they're fighting on the same side as Israel and the United States. That's a good sign, I think, for the future of the region.
John, Cliff, great analysis, my friends. FDD.org, folks. Check them out. X across social media as well. Gentlemen, great job. God bless. We'll see you again soon.